And good evening, everyone. Welcome to this evening's webinar. We're so happy that you can join us for recreational and leisure activity for persons with MS. My name is Brian Thompson, Programs Manager for Can Do Multiple Sclerosis. We are thrilled that you can join us this evening. For those of you who are new to Can Do MS, we deliver health and wellness programs and resources for families living with MS to help them thrive. For more information on Can Do MS, please visit our website at cando-ms.org. We are thrilled to partner with the National MS Society on 12 webinars this year on all sorts of different topics. The mission of the National MS Society is to help people affected by MS live their best lives as they stop MS in its tracks, restore what has been lost, and end MS forever. You can explore other society programs and services on their website, which is nationalmssociety.org. We will save about 15 minutes for questions at the end of the presentation this evening, and you can submit your questions right in your chat box, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see questions/chat box. You can go ahead and enter in your questions there, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. We really hope this is an interactive discussion. You'll also be able to download a copy of the slides on the right-hand side of your screen. And you'll also receive an email with a link to the archived copy of this webinar. So if you miss anything, it'll be archived both on our website and the National MS Society website for you to go back to. And we'll talk more about Can Do MS resources at the end of the program. With that, I'm thrilled to introduce our speakers for this evening. We have Dr. Alex Ng, who is an exercise physiologist at Marquette University, and Chris Wegner, who's also from Wisconsin, and she is living with MS. And so I'm going to let Alex and Chris go ahead and introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and get started. So first up, I'll introduce Alex Ng.
Hi, everyone. I'm really pleased to be speaking with you tonight. Briefly, I'm an academic exercise physiologist, and I both teach and have a research lab at Marquette University in Milwaukee. I've also been a member of Can Do in some iteration. Back in the day, it was the Jimmy Huga Center, and so I've been involved with this group for about 23 years, and that also happens to be about as long as I've been involved with MS research. Chris,
hello, folks.
You're up.
Yep. Hi, my name is Chris Wegner, and as the slide says, I am living with MS. I was diagnosed in October 2007. I call it relapsing remitting MS, but I do have some issues with cognition and with speech. And you'll probably notice those tonight. So I ask for your patience with that. I also have some issues with balance and heat, all those fun things. So I'm sure we're all going to be able to relate to each other and see what happens. I am a retired pastor, and I'm now an artist.
Ooh, how appropriate for today's presentation. And I not even know that you were a pastor. So today we're going to try and bring you through some things, and the objectives would be, one, to understand the benefits of recreational physical activity to persons both with and without MS. I think what's really new about this, or perhaps special, is hopefully you'll also understand the benefits of leisure activity to persons both with and without MS. And then finally, what I'm very excited about is to understand the importance of the arts as not only therapy, but just for fun and as it can contribute to overall wellness. I'm going to take perhaps a non-traditional approach to this, and I'm going to look at it as an upside-down pyramid. And I call this the leisure time pyramid. There's been a lot that's been said and written about exercise for persons with MS. I know it's been covered in this webinar series. I did something on it a couple of years ago, and I know many other people have as well. But I think it's still important to at least mention purposeful exercise, because so many of us actually exercise during our leisure time. So I don't want to discount purposeful exercise. But then I'm going to try to move into physical activity as opposed to purposeful exercise. and emphasize recreational physical activity, and then end up with non-physical or leisure time activity, particularly as it may relate to lifestyle. So physical activity and exercise is certainly important. It's important for everyone. A little definition here: physical activity or exercise by its very nature implies muscle contraction. You don't even have to be moving. You could be propelling yourself, but physical activity or exercise implies muscle contraction and energy use. So, I'm sorry. So there are several ways that we can address physical activity, and with adequate physical activity, we should see an improvement in physical fitness. So this is kind of the traditional way that we look at physical activity or exercise. Very important for physical fitness. And this was particularly true during the, let's say, mid-20th century, when there was a huge push towards, well, actually combat readiness. We now know that's incredibly important for health in terms of disease prevention. It can also be a very important, or it can be very important for rehabilitation or physical rehabilitation if you have some type of an injury, or if you need a tune-up after a relapse or something like this. Now, what's really brand new over the last 10, 20 years is that we recognize how important exercise and physical activity is for mental health or mental fitness and health. So this is kind of new, and of course we now know that exercise is very important for wellness. Okay, what is wellness? Wellness was actually first coined in the 1970s or so, but it's been a concept well before then. And we can think of wellness as one's ability to achieve one's potential, and regardless of whether you have a disease or not, such as MS. And exercise is a very important part of this overall wellness. And as an exercise physiologist, sometimes I think it's the most important part. But of course, if you look through here, there are other aspects of wellness. As where's my MS? There it is. And so it's very important that we have adequate social support, hanging out with friends. It's occupational wellness is very important. So if you're working, whether you're pleased or not pleased with your work, spirituality in whatever form may be important to you is incredibly important for wellness. Being able to have confidence in some type of behavior that we want to perform. This would be considered self-efficacy, can also be considered part of wellness. Education or continually learning, intellectually challenging ourselves is a part of wellness, as is nutrition, and of course, as is exercise. And in fact, we're not going to really talk about nutrition today, but there is one aspect that may overlap with nutrition. So what about MS and exercise? Why am I starting here? Well, historically, it's always been thought that that exercise was bad for MS. And perhaps rightfully so, because, when you exercise, temperature goes up and you could become fatigued. But we also know that being sedentary and stress-free is really almost incompatible with life. And so a sedentary lifestyle in and of itself can decrease mobility, decrease strength, and increase health risk. Well, this traditional thought that exercise was bad for persons with MS was challenged by our founder, Jimmy Huga, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, and we now know that exercise is not only safe, but effective for persons with MS. So not all stress is bad. So, Chris, would you say that it's safe to say that exercise is kind of incorporated into our routine medical care now, since this information has been out there for so long?
I think it's really important, and from my experience, it's wonderful as far as how it's helped me fight any kind of relapses. And really, for me, it's a use it or lose it kind of thing. Not all neurologists, I don't believe, are all on board with this, but there's quite a few people that I'm able to enjoy workouts with that would definitely say exercise is key.
Great, thank you. So you think there's still neurologists that have not jumped on board this, even in this day and age?
I do, and it's only because I am able to talk to a bunch of other folks, and more and more people are talking to the neurologist about it, and I think that people are coming on board. But if folks have a neurologist that's not on board, I think it's important to give them some resources to take a look at as well.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Yeah, I was actually surprised to hear that, but so here is something you can do to help spread the word. Make sure that everyone knows the importance of exercise.
Absolutely.
So, and I mentioned earlier kind of some of the broad strokes of why exercise can be important, but it can be particularly important for someone with MS. I think the evidence is out there now to suggest that exercise can combat the fatigue of MS. It can lead to improved self-efficacy. It can help with fighting depression, and this is for anybody, not just with someone with MS. 5 minutes of aerobic exercise can decrease stress and anxiety. Persons with MS can have decreased bone mineral density, which could lead to increased fracture risk. I'm sure there are some of you in our audience that may have some problems keeping your balance, so this could lead to increased falls and fractures. So exercise is very important for maintaining bone mineral density, and in general, people with MS have low bone density, so that's why it's important. The evidence is mounting that exercise is very important for cognition and perhaps memory, and some of the newest work in exercise suggests that it may have immunomodulatory effects. So it could actually be interacting with or modifying the disease process itself. So there's some very exciting things that are coming out of the exercise science literature. Okay, I've mentioned physical activity, and I want to kind of define this a little bit more, specifically how we can differ physical activity from exercise. Okay, exercise is a subset of physical activity and movement, whereas it is very purposeful, and often it is prescribed and can be described by how often do you work out, how long do you work out, and what is the intensity of a particular workout, as opposed to just going in for a walk in the park or walking during your lunchtime. So that's the difference between physical activity and exercise. Primarily that exercise is very purposeful. So I don't want to spend a lot of time with this. You'll have access to copies of these slides, and you can also look this up quite easily if you just Google Canadian exercise recommendations or even just exercise recommendations for persons with MS. And these are the Canadian guidelines, and this came about from putting a bunch of experts in a room, including U.S. experts. They probably argued for a bit and came up with these evidence-supported recommendations for exercise for persons with MS. And the important thing for this particular webinar is that the guidelines suggest that we should strive for 60 minutes of moderate exercise per week. Okay, 60 minutes. For the average population, this would be 150 minutes. And these are guidelines only, because I know a lot of people with MS for whom 150 minutes would be easy, and I certainly know a lot of people without MS for whom working up to 60 minutes of moderate exercise would be hard. So consider these as guidelines only, but think about the total accumulated minutes. For the record, the recommendations are that aerobic exercise or cardio should be performed twice a week at about 30 minutes each in duration, and this should be at a moderate intensity. So briefly, without getting into this too much, moderate intensity would be when it just starts being a little bit more difficult to talk. Maybe you've just broken into a sweat, or maybe you're just about to, but it's something that you could do for maybe not if you're not used to it, but something that you could work up to and do for 10 or 15 minutes. We tend to think of this as cardio or endurance. It can be done with the legs, the arms, or both. So these are the so-called cardio or endurance guidelines. And again, remember the 60 minutes. There are additional exercise recommendations, and one is strength workout, or resistance is what we call it now. The suggestion here is for twice per week. You can do it the same day as cardio, so you don't have to work out 4 days per week necessarily. And these can be done with, if you go to a gym, you can use the machinery there. It can be done with elastic bands, body weight, or even soup cans. If you're into the lingo, usually we recommend 2 sets of what we call 10 or 15 repetitions. So if you're going to lift a soup can, you would do it 10 times, so that would be 10 repetitions, and you would have just done 1 set, rest a bit, do it again, and then 10 repetitions, and that would have been now 2 sets. And here's a picture of, oh, look, it's Chris. And she is lifting a lot more weight than I could ever hope to lift. Chris, can you comment a little bit about exercising in a gym, or maybe what the MS community has in our area?
Sure. Right now, we're blessed to have 3 different gyms that have designated times for folks with MS. We have where I'm pictured there is our strength gym, and we're called the MS Power Class. And the goal really is to just strengthen our muscles, strengthen our core, and work on our balance. And that happens once a week. And then we have another gym that has been amazing. And it started with just a few people with MS, but now we have so many folks coming. I would venture to guess 25 to 30 folks 2 times a week. And we have a bunch of volunteers that come and help. And now Dan, who runs that, has started a not-for-profit, MS Just Keep Moving. And through that, he's able to get some additional equipment and whatnot, also coming from the MS Society. And with that, we've also started a Lego group, Alcohol Ink painting group, and some nutrition classes too. So it's we've got a lot going on here in Milwaukee.
So did you say you started a painting class as well?
Alcohol ink painting. So it's you drop these you use a squeeze bottle and drop ink onto different surfaces. So it's not that you have to paint with a brush or whatever, but everyone is able to just do a little squeeze, and it makes these wonderful tiles, or we've done it on rocks, paper. It's a really fun time.
Oh, that's great. In fact, if I had organized this correctly, that would have been a great segue into MS and the arts. But it's exciting to hear that Dan has incorporated both the physical training as well as the more artistic or mental side, should I say? Now, Chris, again, kind of looking at you lifting this gigantic weight, and I know that you're comparatively ambulatory, yet not symptom-free. But can exercise, is it appropriate for anybody with MS?
Oh, I believe so. At the gym that we were just talking about, MS Just Keep Moving, we have folks, and at the power class, folks that are in wheelchairs and unable to move more than a hand, to folks that are completely ambulatory, and everything in between. So it's what you do, how you adapt it, how the volunteers are able to help those things, how the trainers work with us. It's everyone gets the benefit of it.
Well, thank you very much. So, would it be safe to say then that really exercise can be for anybody?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And one thing I want to add is in Milwaukee we are blessed, but that doesn't mean that in other areas you couldn't find something. So whether it's calling the MS Society, go to your local YMCA, ask them if they would be willing to start a class. But just grab some folks and see if you can get something started.
Excellent advice. Well, thank you for that. And for people that are way into the resistance exercise, oftentimes flexibility is neglected, so don't forget to stretch. We recommend 2 to 7 times a week, but if I do 3 times a week, I consider myself doing well. Long stretches are better than so-called ballistic ones, and hold them. You can do them 2 to 3 repetitions with a variety of stretches.
I think it's important to do that every day, and you can even do that as you're getting out of bed. I mean, you don't have to have I need to change into my stretching clothes. You can just go ahead and do that right where you are. Very
good. Yes. So it doesn't require a lot of equipment, and it's something that we all should be able to do. And in fact, the stretching kind of leads into yoga, because yoga is a very popular activity. So we're kind of segueing out of the big time moderate physical activity, but along with the exercise recommendations, there are also recommendations for what's been called neuromotor balance or coordination. And this can consist of yoga, Tai Chi, any type of balance or coordination, and this can improve gait and agility. We don't know as much about this, although it is recognized as important now. And so with respect to intensity and duration, maybe 2 to 3 times a week, 20 to 30 minutes. And if you do this in a class, this could also aid in socialization.
Yep.
So the bottom line here, I'm sorry, yes, go, Chris.
No, I was going to say, again, we're really blessed here in Milwaukee area. We have MS-specific yoga classes, and they're held through a hospital. So, go ask a hospital if you don't have something like that. Hey, could you start an MS yoga class for us? Especially the hospitals that maybe you've gone to on a relapse or something, they know what it takes to get back to where you were. So I would ask them.
So it pays to be your own advocate with respect to exercise. And you'd be surprised at how many, if there's not a yoga specialist in your area, I'll bet you anything there would be people who would be willing to learn and fulfill that function.
Yep.
So the bottom line here is, and I'm going to try to differentiate between personal opinion and scientific evidence, but the bottom line here is that the scientific evidence certainly supports that if you follow these guidelines, then you should improve fitness, reduce fatigue, improve mobility, and enhance your overall quality of life. So, I know that even though some of you may already be meeting the guidelines, some of you are probably thinking, yikes, 150 minutes a week. Well, this is kind of nice because for all individuals, and this is from the American College of Sports Medicine 2011 guidelines, as well as the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and these groups recognize that even if you're not able to meet the exercise targets, anyone can still benefit from engaging in amounts of exercise even less than recommended. So it's important to do something, and it's important to be active. And that leads to our next topic, and that is, for most of us, we sit around a lot. Some of us, it's kind of forced, or we may be doing it at work, or we're sitting on the couch watching TV. What we now think is that it's not just think, I think the evidence is pretty overwhelming now, that sedentary behavior, as indicated by sitting, is different from lack of moderate to vigorous exercise. And being sedentary and exercising are completely separate and independent risk factors that can contribute to cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and in fact, a sedentary lifestyle can be correlated to all-cause mortality. And this is an area of intense ongoing research. So it's just as important to not be sedentary. And so what can we do? We want to decrease screen time. As much as we can, we want to decrease sitting, or we want to decrease sitting still. So fidgeting can be a good thing. And of course, the worst thing for those of us who are working, the worst thing to our health is probably work, or at least desk work. So what are things you can do to not be sedentary? That's not necessarily purposeful exercise. Well, you'd be surprised. I mean, gardening fits into this category. Hanging out with grandkids or kids just in general. That can actually be quite active. And camping, just going camping or doing something fun outdoors. There's a lot of ways to not be sedentary. Chris, do you have anything to comment here with respect to how to decrease sedentary time?
Sure. Like when you're sitting at your desk, like right now I'm sitting on a stability ball, which is, engaging your core and working on your balance. I know that when I first started exercise, even before I had MS, I started by just moving during commercials. And you'll be amazed at how much movement you can get out of a half-hour show.
Excellent. And let me point out also that cooking counts. Make sure that it's low in saturated fat and salt, but cooking counts also, so long as you're not sitting still while you're cooking.
Right. I think any kind of standing, when you're doing the laundry or when you're doing the dishes, any kind of standing and moving as you're doing that works. Yes,
so just doing activities of daily living can actually aid to be an aid to a non-sedentary lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to move a little bit. I like to camp, and I also like to garden. And if you're engaged in something that you like to do, it becomes recreation, and it's much easier to comply to something that's fun or recreational. So I want to talk briefly about recreational sports, and I use the term sports somewhat arbitrarily, but cycling, skiing or snowboarding, canoe, kayaking, climbing, these aren't really things that we think of when we think about exercise and going to the gym. But these can be a very, very important part of maintaining an active lifestyle. So actually, if you look at the picture on the right, there's a person high up on the wall, and that's actually Chris. And the other two slides I have just as an illustration that almost any sport, if you need it, it can be adapted. So, Chris, in addition to climbing higher, what other sports are you interested in? Particularly other sports that you may do with other people with MS.
Well, we have a large team of bikers for the MS 150 MS ride, and several of our folks from our gym. We started, I want to say, 6 or 7 years ago, and some of us started on haven't been riding two-wheelers because of our balance and whatever, but we've gotten some tandem bikes, some trikes, some recumbent trikes, and hand cycles, like the one that's pictured below on the left there. And we have two of our gym rats, we call ourselves, that are competing now in national races on hand cycles. So at the beginning, they had a very hard time on two-wheel bikes, but found that adapting to hand cycles, they are like power guys. It's pretty exciting.
Very good. And in fact, and I hope to see some of them race in our upcoming Toad series, which is a cycling series here in Wisconsin. You know, sometimes I think it's easier to stay motivated if you have a goal. And, you know, what better goal than raising money for your favorite MS charity? And Brian did not make me say that, but certainly there's Can Do Vertical Express, skiing to raise money for Can Do MS. There's also the very popular MS 150 events, which are major fundraisers for the National MS Society. So I think having a goal can really help with compliance or help you stay motivated. And in fact, I intend to join Chris's team this year. There, you heard me say it nationally. So now I'm going to be held to it. And that would be the Peppy Peddlers. So Chris, you mentioned that your team. How many are in the Peppy Peddlers, and then how many riders actually have MS?
Well, there's over 100, and I'll be chastised for not knowing the exact number, but there's over 100 riders on our team, and we do have the largest number of riders with MS in the state of Wisconsin, and we're thinking probably across the nation. We have 20 or 25 people that are riding with MS, which is an amazing event. We have 50, 75, or 100-mile routes both days of the ride. But I wanted to say, too, even if you don't bike, there's other ways to get involved in those things. There's volunteering. The group dynamic that happens through that is pretty exciting. You are then supporting the folks that are raising money for the MS Society or for Can Do as well. So even if you can't bike, there's certainly other ways that you can get involved in those and move.
So it would seem that volunteering in any way for an event like this, even if you're not riding, can contribute to overall wellness by socialization, doing something good, and not being sedentary.
Absolutely.
So wellness is where you find it.
Yeah. And we have folks that volunteer at one of the rest areas we have that are, they come in their wheelchairs or their walkers, and they're cheerleaders for the people that are coming to the rest stop. And we've been told that we are the most active rest stop, and that's with just a bunch of wonderful folks that can't ride but want to be there to support the riders.
Excellent. So if we move on from so-called recreational sports, I want to, for lack of a better term, let's call this outdoor recreational activities. And these are things that you can be doing during your leisure time: hiking, hunting, fishing, rafting. And with respect to hiking, this is something you can do in a mixed group. The group to my right, there's a person in a wheelchair in the background and someone using a cane in the foreground. Okay, I'm going to go on a soapbox a little bit now, and I'm a firm believer of what's called the biophilia hypothesis, which essentially states that we're supposed to be outdoors. Certainly, it's okay to have shelters, but we're adapted to the outside. We evolved from the outside, and there's a lot of good things. And in fact, there's a lot of studies that show that being outdoors can actually have therapeutic effects. In I believe it's Korea, they actually have therapeutic forests, and they call this forest bathing. And there's actually studies that have shown beneficial effects of just being outside in nature. And of course, there are other benefits too that are a little less soft and fuzzy, and that is being outside can help produce naturally vitamin D. So there's my little overlap with nutrition. So being outside can help with vitamin D, and it's very important for stress reduction and physical activity. When you go out into a forest or a meadow or away from an urban environment, your blood pressure drops. So it can be very important, and I'm a firm believer of just walking, hiking, or being outdoors. And this is something that a lot of us already kind of seek out in our leisure time. And it's become a lot more accessible now because I think hiking and trekking poles have been a real game changer because it makes not falling fashionable. So I think that there's kind of a removal of, I hope someone laughed at that. I can't hear. No feedback. Anyway, it removes the stigma of using an ambulatory aid, at least if you buy it from an outdoor rec store. So it's a great way to get outdoors, particularly if you need a little help with your endurance or your balance. Chris, this is you to the right. Do you have any advice for someone with respect to hiking or how to get around with some type of an outdoor activity?
Absolutely. I struggle a lot with heat, and that's a pretty typical thing with those of us with MS. So cooling vests, the scarves that you can tie around your neck, or cooling towels, and the MS Association of America has a cooling distribution program. There's some eligibility that's needed, but that you have to meet. But they give away cooling vests and scarves and whatnot. So that's been a big help. I've also done things like, put a bag of ice cubes in my helmet, of my bike helmet. But for hiking, I think one of the most things that are the most important things is to plan ahead. Not only where you're going to be going, finding out what type of a path it is, how long is that going to go, what's the surface of the path, and then to be really prepared when you go. You're going to bring drinking water, your cooling products if you need those. If it's in a cooler environment, you want to have layers of clothing because you never know how hot you're going to get. And then make sure you have the right footwear. If you're able to walk, it's really important to have a good support so you can take those hills or those rocks or whatever. And then I've learned that you have to be very flexible. If it's too hot, you just need to stop. Take a moment to rest or even not go farther because you need the energy to go all the way back to where you came from. So I think it's important to be prepared. The picture on the right is we were walking in the mountains in North Carolina, and we were told that it's never warm in the mountains. So we wore our long pants and long sleeve shirt, and it was 84. So it was hot, and it's early spring when we went. There weren't many leaves on the trees or whatever. So we got to a spot where there was a bench, and that's where I parked myself, drinking a lot of water because I was losing a lot of water, and let the others continue on the hike farther because I knew that was not going to be something that I can do, plus get back to the car. So being flexible, planning ahead, be prepared, I think those are all things that are going to make being outside and doing those really fun things possible.
Thank you, Chris. That's great advice. Sounds like I'm talking to a Boy Scout here, too. Be prepared.
That's right.
Okay, so I'd like to move away from the outdoors and go back inside. And so the dance shows have become very popular on TV now. So you think you can dance, so you think you can't dance because you have MS? Well, you can dance with the MS stars, that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to talk just briefly about the power of dance and chronic disease. Dance has been studied in Parkinson's disease, stroke, cardiovascular disease, sedentary older adults, veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, adolescents with autism. And until recently, it's never really been looked at in MS, which is kind of surprising to me, because partner dance in particular could be a very good thing because a partner can provide essentially an ambulatory aid or a balance aid if you need it. And it could allow a person to move around the floor or just to be upright for a longer period of time than without a partner. Well, as it turns out, there have been 2 studies now looking at partner dance, and there's also been one looking at the therapeutic effects of ballet. Salsa has been studied and has shown that there are improvements in walking and balance. And also, I recently completed several years ago, I completed a couple of studies looking at recreational partnered ballroom dance. And this consists of waltz, something similar to a swing dance, foxtrot, rumba. It lasted for 6 weeks, and we showed that there was positive psychological improvement, emotional improvement, and physical improvements in our participants. So we were very excited to see those effects. And to be honest with you, I'm not necessarily suggesting that everyone needs to go out and participate in ballroom dance for 6 weeks, but it could be an important addition to just your bag of physical activities that you like to do, maybe do occasionally, a couple times a year or whatever. And it's possible that there could be good benefits from this.
Well, I know we were
yes,
part
and
of
in
that
fact,
yeah.
Chris was a participant in that dance. Chris, do you want to add anything real quickly?
It was a blast, and one of the things that we noticed is my lovely husband Brian cannot keep a beat, and I can, and so I was able to tap the beats on his shoulder to keep us in step. But I also needed, like you say, I needed the help in my balance and whatnot. So he was right there. It was fun.
Interesting. So it could be kind of an equalizer.
Absolutely.
And I've actually heard that from several of our other participants, that they felt like it kind of equalized the playing field between them and their spouse. And in addition, dance can be very social. And again, looking back at our wellness chart, so it can be very social, and more than one of our participants has referred to it as being an enforced date night. So it could also help with relationships. And I want to point out that, yes, in addition, dance can have a certain amount of artistry associated with it. And it is considered one of the arts. And with that, I'd like to segue to the importance of the arts for persons with MS. And the arts in medicine is actually right now a very hot topic. I just got back from a consortium of MS centers meeting, and there was a whole session devoted to the arts and MS, kind of for therapy. And I'm going to talk about the arts more, again, in terms of leisure and recreation, but there's a lot of research being done now. So I do want to remove medicine from the equation, and again, just talk about this as a leisure pursuit. Chris, you had mentioned something about these pictures. So the International Journal of MS Care, and I know neurology has done this too, but they actually use pictures painted by artists with MS.
Correct. The MS Association of America has an art program that they feature folks that are doing art with painting or drawings, pastels and whatnot, and they have them on their website. They do art showcases. It's pretty exciting and beautiful work.
And now, you're an artist too, correct?
I am. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. And we'll see some of your work a little later on here. But I thought we should talk about music first. And the reason being is we just kind of ended up on dance. And dance is inextricably associated with music. So I think it would be important to talk about music here. And again, I'm not going to be talking about music therapies per se, although some of the research comes out of music therapy. But I'm going to talk about music as a leisure activity. Now, certainly, MS is no stranger to music, nor is music a stranger to MS. Here are two very famous musicians who have had or have MS. Jacqueline Dupre, perhaps one of the world's greatest cellists of her age, and Clay Walker. So it really spans the genres between classical and country music. But again, I want to talk about music or MS and music for the rest of us. So what I'm talking about is listening to whatever form of music you're interested in, singing, playing an instrument. And if you look at this is a great illustration of what I'm talking about. So here we have someone playing an instrument. Let's say that she's singing too. And whoa, look at this. We're paddling a canoe. So we've got some physical activity. We've got some music. And if any amorous intentions go awry, then swimming is also an excellent form of physical activity and exercise for persons with MS. Hopefully they won't tip over.
No, I hope not either. And I think some of the important things with the music is when you listen, all types of music, as you mentioned, it's important, I think, to help grow your selection and whatnot. But it can affect your mood and your energy and your movement. And I think of things like listening to Pharrell Williams' Happy Dance or Happy Song, and there's no way that you're not going to move. You're not going to move something. You're not going to move something that you're able to move. And it just puts a smile on your face, a little skip in your step. And you're mentioning singing in a choir, or I really like to sing in the car, and I think it's a way to entertain the others at your stop signs. But you can also sing in the shower. You can sing in the shower. Brian and I, mostly Brian, makes up songs with familiar tunes like Jingle Bells. He'll just make up words to Jingle Bells, like I love my wife, da 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 da. So it's fun stuff.
Wait, you mean as opposed to Santa Smells?
Yes, absolutely. And then the playing an instrument, anything can be a drum. Just watch how little kids play with music and keeping beats and whatever. And I believe sometimes when we get the diagnosis of MS, we stop all the things that we used to do. Number one, because we're panicking, but also we might think, well, that's over with now. I can't do that. But I think if you've played an instrument in the past, it'd be really good to try it again. And you may not be able to do it in the same way that you did before, but you can also, pick up and at least do something.
Very good. More excellent advice. So music can, in addition to the emotional benefits of music, there's been some studies, and not all in MS, but there could be improved global brain function as a result of playing an instrument. Cognition can improve. Certainly overall quality of life can improve. And some people are suggesting that synaptic integrity of the brain or activity-driven neuroplasticity can also occur with music performance. So what's this activity-driven neuroplasticity? This would be if you're playing an instrument, getting back to one, or learning something new, there could be new pathways formed to replace or supplement any of the pathways that would have been damaged by the MS. So singing is also very important. Chris mentioned singing, and I actually think of singing as a form of physical activity because we're exercising the diaphragm, which is a skeletal muscle, just like your quadriceps or biceps. There are postural muscles. So if you're singing in a choir and your choir director says, sit up straight, well, we're using our postural muscles, and we're also using our respiratory muscles, not only for breathing, but invariably for laughing as well. So all of those things can aid to or can be benefits from music. If we move now into art, not art, this is all art. If we move more into painting, works on paper, or 2D art, there's a famous MS artist, Elizabeth Jameson, and she has primary progressive disease, I believe. And what she did, and perhaps in part to cope, was she created these beautiful images from her MRIs and other things that had to do with her actual diagnosis. This image up in the upper right, termed celebration, this is actually blood vessels. And the one to the lower left, poetry, is formed from a diffusion tensor imaging, and as was the one from heart flow. The mind on the eye, it looks like it could be just an X-ray. So art can certainly be where you find it, but it can be very important for expression as well as self-reflection. Now, these examples are not from MS, but it's kind of as an example of how art can be used to express what words cannot. So this is both Chemotherapy 1 and Chemotherapy 2 by Robert Arneson, and these are on display at I call it the SFMOMA, but it's the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. And we have one of Robert Arneson's works here in Milwaukee. And if you live anywhere near an art museum, I would bet that Robert Arneson has one of his works in there. These are, of course, were titled Chemotherapy 1 and Chemotherapy 2. And you can just see what's going on through his mind, the memory loss, impaired cognition, kind of the physical ravaging that can occur not only through the cancer but through the therapies itself, as well as the pain. So sculpture can convey, perhaps more so than words, or can convey expressions more so than words. And this also illustrates that art does not have to be 2D or two-dimensional as in painting or drawing. But like the musicians, okay, well, these are examples of a famous artist, but what about the rest of us? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Chris right now, and I know we're getting towards the end of our hour, but art is certainly a medium for expression, fun, as well as joy. So these are some of Chris's creations, art with found stones. Chris, do you want to talk briefly about this, particularly
Sure.
as to how it may relate to MS?
Absolutely. These are some of the story rocks, we call them, that we make. It's a very therapeutic thing for me. I'm able to think creatively. I get to see my thoughts on a product, which is really fun. But there's a whole process in it, in that we started, we collect these things out on the beaches, so we get the physical activity. We come back home, we have to bleach them because, they come from the Great Lakes. But we are able then then I sort them all and whatever, and you start thinking of things to make. So sometimes the rock shapes really determine what's going to be happening or what I'm going to make. And other times I have an idea and I have to just search through the rocks to find the right one. But I make these to be creative, and then at the end result is to sell them, but to make other people smile and bringing them joy as they come up with their own stories for the Story Rocks.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing that.
Sure.
I'm going to touch briefly on theater, and this was brought about in part by a play that's recently been published and produced at least a couple times. It's called The Unexpected Guest, a glimpse into the lives of people enduring the challenge of MS, playing two sets. And for theater, I think it doesn't really matter whether you're a patron or going to a play or if you're a participant. I think either way it can aid to socialization. If you're going to a theater, then you can talk afterwards. What did I just see? Was it good? Was it bad? What do you think they meant? It can be an aid to communication, using the same example, or if you're actually in the theater or if you're in some type of drama class or workshop. It can also be a way to, or another means towards self-expression and communication. So theater, very important part of the arts.
I think it's a good way to escape sometimes too.
Oh, thank you for that. What do you mean escape?
Maybe from your situation, you are not in the best mood, or things are going wrong around you, or just not right. It's good to go either a live theater or a movie or something that can break it up a little bit, bring you some joy.
Very good. And I usually find them stimulating also. Kind of, I never thought about that. So that brings us to close to the end here, and I just want to briefly mention about reading, writing, and coloring. This is perhaps when you might think that, well, isn't this kind of getting into being sedentary? Well, if you're coloring, you're probably moving a limb. If you're reading, all I'll say is just make sure you move around every 20 minutes, and I think we can allow that. And the reason being because reading and writing is actually positively associated with memory. Now, there's not a lot of studies, but there's at least one that has shown that in MS, reading can improve memory. It can also aid in in learning, intellectual growth with respect to wellness. Writing can be an excellent form of communication, and it can be therapeutic if the writing is reflective or a means for self-expression, very much in the same way that painting or sculpture could be. Chris, I'm going to let you talk about coloring since you're the one that forced me to put this in here, but I want to briefly mention why I put Dracula in here. Unfortunately, I can't see a raise of hands because you're all sitting behind your computer screens, but why is Dracula so important to MS? Well, the author, Bram Stoker, actually wrote Jean-Martin Charcot into the Dracula story. So Jean-Martin Charcot was the French neurologist that first recognized MS as a clinical entity. It's been described before him, but we kind of consider him the father of neurology, and he was a kind of rock star in his time, and he was actually written into Dracula because he's also the father of hypnosis. And they were able to hypnotize Lucy, who was bitten by the evil count, and it was through this hypnosis that they were able to know where Dracula was and finally drive a stake through his heart, or whatever it is that they killed him. I don't think it was a stake. I think they might have hacked him up with some kukris or something. Anyway, I'm getting a little off the topic here. So that brings us back to coloring.
Right.
Chris, you're up.
Yep. Coloring has been a part of my life, all of my life, actually. I've had a basket of coloring books for many years, just in the living room with crayons or markers or pencils. And you can do things from simple kids' books to coloring for adult books that have a lot of detail. I think being creative with the color, with the strokes of your pencil or your markers, it brings enjoyment. Right now, I'm working on a women's devotional that you color at the same time. So you read the scripture, you read some inspirational quotes, and then there's room for you to write your prayers and thoughts. That really relaxes me, and I have fun with the coloring. Other things that I do, I color just papers and whatnot, and I use them as cards to send to people. There's many things that you can do online to make prints of books, whatnot, to color, or you can go to Michael's or Hobby Lobby, whatever. And I think any of these activities that we talked about, the reading, the writing, the coloring, any of those can be done outside. So you can get your vitamin D, you can be out in nature. And I do think that that's a big source of healing. So the other thing I was mentioned is that any of these things can be done in a group. So you can have some social interactions. There's many book clubs. If you don't know one, you can start one. There's writers guilds. There's coloring gatherings. Just have a bunch of friends over and do some of that together. But I think it's really important to keep, like Dr. Ng had on the first slide, having the wellness circle. All of this fits into that. So I think it's all fun and all good.
Great. Well, thank you, Chris. I think I'm going to start a vampire book club. See how many takers I have. So,
yeah,
we just talked very briefly. I mean, there's certainly a lot more we could have talked about than what we did, but I hope this gives you some ideas on ways to incorporate leisure and recreational time into your lifestyle, and perhaps to lead a more fulfilling life as a result of that. So I would challenge you to answer the question of what next? When was the last time you did something for the first time? So try something new. Try dancing. Go partner dancing. Create something new. Or even read something new. So with that, I think we're finished talking to you, and we'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions.
All right. Thank you so
Brian
much, Alex. Yes, thank you, Alex, and thank you, Chris, so much for sharing all that great information and for sharing those stories. Hopefully everyone learned a little bit more about the importance of exercise and how we all can do that and different forms of leisure and recreation, and you learned something about Dracula tonight, so that's it's a bonus. We do have time for a few questions. If we don't get to your questions tonight, I will tell you about a way that you can submit a question to Can Do MS, and we'll try to get everyone an answer to what's on their mind. So the first question is for Chris, and it says, Chris, have you ever walked on gravel or an unstable hill or on sand, and what do you use?
Absolutely. When we go collect the rocks, they're all on sand or pebble beaches, whatnot. I do use my sticks, my extra sticks, and I also plant myself, whether it's using a blanket or whatever, to sit down for a while as well, right there on the beach. But I think it's important to have whatever it works for you to be stable. So the extra sticks work for me.
Excellent. And Alex, kind of on that note, there was a question for you. Can exercise actually improve balance? Is there data or science out there to
without citing specific studies, I think that yes, there is some evidence that it can improve balance. And in fact, in the partnered ballroom dance that I shared with you, there was some evidence that it can improve at least clinical measures of balance. And there's another study, hopefully, that will be out soon, and that, again, from my lab, that my lab did, and yeah, we did see improved balance. So
Right.
dance can certainly improve balance. I know that for sure.
That's great. Um, some of the most common questions that we received was about heat and just heat sensitivity. And Chris, you touched upon that a little bit, but maybe you could kind of share a little bit more about your experiences managing kind of that overwhelming heat. And I know you had mentioned that there are cooling vests available. Do you know any more details on where folks can find out more information about that?
Yep, that was at the Multiple Sclerosis Association of America, and they have a cooling distribution program. But you can also look up online. I know, sorry, it's getting late. My brain is not working.
Polar has some, yes.
Yeah, has some great pieces of equipment as well. But I think just having, a bag of ice, whether you keep that in the car or, walk with a small cooler, not like a hard styrofoam cooler, but one of those collapsible insulated bags. Anything that you can do that you can cool down right away, and then just stop and drink some water.
And I might want to add to that also that some people drink slushies as a way to cool off your core temperature, because that's what's really causing all the problems. And make sure there's fans in the room, air conditioning. And if you Google just cooling vests, you'll come up with several products.
That's great. Thank you. In addition to sort of heat-related, temperature-relaed issues, I think the most common question we received was just about fatigue and just being so overwhelmingly tired that, exercise and getting out and doing all these things, it sounds great, but when you hit that wall, there's not a whole lot you can do. So any suggestions, both Chris from your experiences and Alex from your studies of how folks can manage just that overwhelming fatigue and still be able to participate in some of these activities?
Yes. If you don't mind, I'll go first, and then I'll turn it over to Chris. And in fact, Chris actually mentioned it earlier. You kind of need to plan. You need to know yourself. This is actually a complicated question. You should not be exercising like 60 minutes your first time out. It might be fine to exercise, a couple minutes, and I really like to emphasize the accumulated time so that you can kind of parse out your exercising and stop just before you start getting fatigued. If you can do this, your fatigue might actually improve. There's kind of a saying that says, if you don't feel as good 2 hours from when you did the exercises when you started, then you probably went too hard. So it's really important to start light and build up. You don't need to get to that 60 minutes in a week, 2 weeks, or even a year. And you might also stress lower levels of activity. So instead of the moderate, just think about being active. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think sometimes I know that for me, I've used fatigue is real. I mean, it's definitely real. But I know that I have to push myself to go to the gym some days, or I have to push myself to get on my bike to train. But if you go, like you said, Alex, if you start maybe walking down or rolling down or using your walker down the driveway or just down the street and come back, and you do that several times, you will grow in your abilities to do those things. And then the next day you can do a little more, or the next day you rest, and then the following day you do a little bit more. You're the one that knows your body, but I think we also have to push ourselves as well.
And along with the pushing, sometimes it helps to have an exercise buddy. That way you can kind of each hold each other accountable.
Absolutely.
That's a great point. Alex, you mentioned the value of reading. As far as audiobooks or podcasts, do you see sort of similar benefits in engaging in those activities?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because on one you're getting the information visually, and the other one you're getting it auditorily. So I'm going to have to say I don't know. However, even if the benefits weren't the same, I would suggest that an audio book would be beneficial in and of itself. Just the fact that you're stimulating your brain, you could be learning something new if it was nonfiction, and it might be just enough to kind of turn off the chatter of your everyday life.
And similar, board games, playing games. Are you aware of any research?
Yes, I meant to say that. This is more what I think and what I've read, but I don't know if there's a lot of evidence. But board games are great. So you can, particularly if you're doing it with a group of friends, and it can even be just a game of pure chance. But board games are great for social interaction. It can aid. It can be laugh-inducing. If it's a game of strategy like chess, then it can also be an intellectual pursuit as well. So I did not have this in there. Video games can be very good, particularly if you're doing a Wii Fit or one of the Kinect games. And sorry if I'm dating myself, there might be something even better out there, like with some of the new virtual reality games. But if you're moving around, that can only be a good thing.
All fun and games. Chris, we'll save the last question for you, and it's a pretty good one for you. It says, Chris, where can I purchase one of your story rocks?
Oh, you come to the Milwaukee area and you come to one of the shows I'm in. Thank you. That's very sweet. Whoever asked that, thank you very much. You can reach me through. Boy, the brain is turning off.
Can do should probably. Yeah.
We can include a link so people can see more about it.
Yep. Sounds good.
And then, one last question we just got, Alex. Could you just say the name of the play about MS that you were talking about before?
Oh, sure. The Unexpected Guest. I'll see if I can find it. And there it is.
Yeah.
The author, it was written by Gary Gilbert and Gina Madioda. It's The Unexpected Guest, and I think it's published by Kaiser Permanente, but I'm not sure about that.
Great. Well,
and I actually want to try and produce it. I actually want to try and produce it here at Marquette, so I'm going to try and talk to the drama theater department here.
That's great. Well, again, thank you so much, Alex and Chris, for spending your time with us and passing along that great information. And thank you to everyone for joining us and being so active. Not only did we receive so many great questions, but we also just got some comments and ideas of people kayaking and sit skiing and doing art, and so many staying active. So that's wonderful to hear that there's so many ways of being engaged and staying active. So with that, I'm going to tell you about a few more resources that you can access with Can Do MS, as well as the National MS Society, as I quickly navigate these slides. All right. So again, Can Do MS, which the website is cando-ms.org, has a whole series of in-person and online programs in addition to this webinar series. Now that you're registered for this webinar, you're automatically registered for every webinar for the rest of the year, second Tuesday of the month, on all sorts of different topics. So you're already registered and you'll receive reminder emails. So hopefully you can make this a routine and continue to join us on the second Tuesday of every month. In addition, there's a whole lot of library articles. Alex has written a few of them. There's some about recreation and leisure up there. So the more information and education out there, the better. And then finally, on the online side, there's the Ask the Can Do team, where you can submit a question. If we didn't get your question tonight, you can submit that in, and we'll pass it along to one of our team of healthcare experts and our programs consultants and try to get you answers to your questions. In addition, we do in-person programs, a one-day program, two-day programs, and our flagship four-day program. So you can go online and see if we're coming to your town, and all these programs are offered completely free of charge. So hopefully you can continue your journey here with Can Do MS. In addition, the National MS Society has all sorts of great resources. They're really the best at finding those local opportunities, whether it's adaptive sports or finding cooling vests. If you go to nationalmssociety.org, you can find out about local opportunities and as well as their online programs and resources. And then finally, at mspath2care.com is a resource that's brought to you by Can Do MS and Sanofi Genzyme, with lots of resources on shared decision making in your healthcare, shared decision making in your health and wellness, and how you can form a team and use a team to live your best life with MS. So please visit mspath2care.com as well. And then finally, we can only put on these programs through the generous donations of program participants. We can make these free by people passing it on and paying it forward. So there's different ways to donate, either through Can Do MS or the National MS Society, and you can see those links right there. And then finally, you're going to get some surveys, and hopefully you can complete those. The more information that we get, the more we can find out what you need and what we're doing well and what we can improve upon. You're going to get an email also. In addition to the survey email, you'll get an email with a link to the archived copy of this webinar. We usually provide a PDF copy of the slides. I don't think that attachment made it this time, but we'll make sure you get a PDF copy of all these slides so you can go back and use this as a resource. And then we'll hope to see you in about a month, the second Tuesday of July. It'll be July 9th, and it's going to be on progressive MS, so managing the common challenges of progressive MS. So we hope we will see you then. And again, Alex and Chris, thank you so much for joining us this evening and providing such great information and stories and perspectives. We hope everyone enjoyed it, and we hope that everyone has a good evening. Any parting words from our esteemed panel?
Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you.
All right. Again, thank you very much, and look for that survey email as well as the email with all of your archives and the PDF copy. So again, thank you very much.